The quiet threat you never feel until it's too late. It was a Sunday morning when the call came. My patient, John McAllister, age 67, had collapsed while gardening in his backyard in Nashville. No prior heart problems, no chest pain, just a gentle man planting tomatoes for the spring when suddenly the world spun and everything went black. By the time I arrived at the hospital, he was awake but shaken. A mild stroke caused by a clot that had formed silently in one of his arteries. His cholesterol, as it turned out, had been high for years, but he felt fine. He skipped his last few checkups because, in his words, "What's the point if I don't feel sick?" That question still echoes in my heart, because that's the danger with high cholesterol and blood clots. You don't feel them coming. They don't knock. They don't ask permission. They just arrive. Until suddenly you're in a hospital bed, wondering how something so quiet could be so powerful. The illusion of feeling fine. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you checked your cholesterol? Not guessed, not assumed, but checked. Because I've met hundreds of people, smart, kind, responsible, who had no idea they were walking around with cholesterol high enough to damage their heart, their brain, their vision. Why? Because they felt fine. But feeling fine doesn't mean your arteries are fine. It doesn't mean your blood is flowing smoothly, and it definitely doesn't mean you're safe from a clot. Blood clots often form in silence. They're made worse by sticky platelets, inflamed vessel walls, and blood that's thicker than it should be. Add high cholesterol into the mix, and you're essentially layering plaque inside your arteries until one day a piece breaks off. That's all it takes. A fragment, a moment, and everything changes. But here's the good news. It's preventable, not just with pills, but with power. Your power. Through 5 specific, science-backed, life-affirming actions that can lower cholesterol and reduce your risk of thrombosis. We'll cover each of them in this journey, and today we begin with the most misunderstood, the food that acts like medicine, or poison. The fork that builds or breaks your arteries. Meet Margaret from Charleston, South Carolina. Widowed, devoted grandmother. Every morning she made herself a heart-healthy breakfast: wheat toast, margarine, orange juice, and a cup of coffee with powdered creamer. When we looked at her numbers, her total cholesterol was 264. LDL, what we often call the bad cholesterol, was dangerously high. Her triglycerides were climbing, and she had no idea why, because she thought she was doing everything right. But hidden in her daily routine were the very triggers raising her risk: trans fats in margarine and creamer, refined sugars in her juice, simple carbohydrates in her toast. These aren't just empty calories, they're active irritants. They trigger inflammation, they stiffen arteries, they make your blood more prone to clotting. So we made a change: oats instead of toast, avocado instead of margarine, a handful of walnuts, green tea instead of coffee with powder. In 3 months, her LDL dropped by 38 points. Her energy rose, her skin glowed, but most of all, her anxiety about what might happen melted away, because now she knew she wasn't waiting for a stroke. She was preventing one. What you eat becomes your blood. We forget this simple truth. Every bite you take turns into something, into fuel, into repair, into inflammation, or protection. Oily fish like salmon. They reduce clot risk. Leafy greens like spinach. They support clean, relaxed arteries. Garlic, turmeric, ginger, natural anti-clot agents. And then there's fiber. Most people over 60 don't get nearly enough. But soluble fiber, found in oats, beans, apples, flaxseed, literally pulls cholesterol out of your bloodstream like a sponge. It's not complicated, but it is a choice. A fork is not just a utensil. It's a steering wheel, and it's pointing somewhere. Where is yours taking you? A wake-up call, not a death sentence. Back in that hospital room, after John recovered, I asked him what scared him most. He said it wasn't the stroke. It was the fact that it could have been worse, and he wouldn't have seen it coming. But then he paused. But now, he said, I'm ready to do something. That readiness? It's what matters most. You don't have to overhaul your entire life today, but you do have to stop assuming that feeling okay means being okay, because prevention doesn't feel urgent until it becomes too late. Let this be your moment, your wake-up, your quiet turning point. Because in the next chapter, we'll go beyond food, into the hidden dangers of modern living that thicken the blood, tighten the arteries, and quietly build the perfect storm. And together, we'll learn how to stop it. The dangerous stillness we mistake for rest. There's a kind of quiet that isn't peace. It's the quiet of too much sitting, too little movement, too many hours where blood slows down, thickens, and begins to settle where it shouldn't. And it's in this stillness, this modern silent trap, that blood clots often begin. I want to tell you about Ernest Simmons, retired accountant from Portland, Oregon, a thoughtful, gentle man who loved books and crossword puzzles. His cholesterol wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible either. He took his medication, ate reasonably well, but he sat, hours at a time. Reading, watching, waiting. One afternoon, after a long flight to visit his son, Ernest stood up from his seat, and his calf felt tight. He assumed it was just stiffness. 3 days later, he was rushed to the ER with a pulmonary embolism. A blood clot had traveled from his leg to his lungs. That clot formed not because of bad luck, but because of a dangerous habit we often don't question: inactivity. Stillness is not rest. Let me ask you this. How many hours a day do you sit, not just on the couch, but at the table, in the car, on the computer, watching the news, talking on the phone? For most of us over 60, the answer is too many, and it's not our fault. Society pushes us into chairs. Doctors tell us to take it easy. We're told rest is healing, but there's a difference between healing and halting, because when your body doesn't move, blood flow slows, platelets become stickier, muscles lose tone, veins become weak, clot risk increases. This is especially true after meals, long drives, or air travel. It's called venous stasis, and it's one of the silent builders of thrombosis. But the solution isn't a gym. It's rhythm, the power of gentle, consistent movement. I often tell my patients, you don't need to run a marathon, you just need to move like you're alive. Simple daily practices can make a huge difference. A 5-minute walk after every meal, standing and stretching every 30-45 minutes, ankle rolls while watching TV, light squats or toe raises during phone calls. Dancing slowly to your favorite song each morning, each one gets the blood moving, keeps the vessels supple. Lowers blood pressure, increases HDL, the good cholesterol, and reduces clotting factors. Let me tell you about Grace Miller from Albany, New York. She started what she called her stroll and stretch routine. Morning walks in the hallway, midday arm rolls, evening toe taps while brushing her teeth. She laughed when she told me, "I feel like I'm in a one-woman marching band." But here's what changed. Her LDL dropped by 22 points. Her circulation improved. Her blood thinner dosage was reduced. And for the first time in years, she stopped feeling like her body was working against her, all from movement that took her less than 30 minutes a day. Because the body isn't designed to sit. It's designed to flow. The hidden cost of comfort. We love our recliners, our soft chairs, our routines. But comfort can turn to captivity. And the more we surrender to stillness, the more our blood forgets how to move freely. Stillness is not safety. Stillness is a signal. So here's what I ask you to do. Break the cycle, not with force, not with shame, but with rhythm. Stand, walk, stretch, dance, breathe. Let your blood remember how it feels to move with purpose. Let your joints unlock. Let your heart pump like it used to, because your body is waiting, not to be perfect, but to be used, an invitation to rise. Not just from a chair, Ernest recovered, slowly, carefully, with compression socks and supervised walks and new habits that changed everything. He sent me a letter not long ago, said he was walking 3 miles a day now, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Turns out, he wrote, life feels better when your legs remember they're part of it. So let me ask you, what would your legs do if they weren't tired from waiting? What would your heart feel if it weren't pumping against resistance? What would your mind be like if your blood moved like it should? You don't need a gym. You need motion. And if you begin today, even with something as small as a walk to the mailbox, you'll be giving your arteries a reason to stay open. Because in the next chapter, we'll tackle the next hidden threat. Stress, how it thickens your blood, hardens your arteries, and silently raises your risk for clotting, even when everything else seems under control. The stress you carry is thicker than you think. It was 6:30 in the evening when Samuel Wright, a 71-year-old retired firefighter from Tampa, walked into my office. He looked healthy, fit, alert. But when he sat down, I noticed something else. He couldn't stop tapping his fingers on the armrest. His jaw was clenched. His eyes, though polite, were distant. He'd come in because his cholesterol had spiked, despite a clean diet and daily walks. He was confused. "Doc," he said, "I've been doing everything right." Then he paused. "Well, except for sleeping." Turned out Samuel had been waking up at 3 a.m. most nights, heart pounding, mind racing, financial worries, family tensions, unspoken fears. He'd never call it panic, just too much on my plate. But here's what we discovered together. His cholesterol wasn't just from food, it was from pressure. The hidden chemistry of worry. Most people think of stress as a feeling, but it's also a chemical reaction. When your body perceives a threat, real or imagined, it activates the fight-or-flight system. Adrenaline rises, cortisol floods the bloodstream. And what do these stress hormones do? Raise your blood pressure. Thicken your blood in case of injury. Increase LDL cholesterol production. Suppress your body's ability to clear fats. Constrict blood vessels. It's a survival mechanism. Great for escaping danger. Terrible if it happens every day at the dinner table, in front of the news, or alone in bed with your thoughts. Stress literally reshapes your blood, and over time, it turns from mental weight into physical risk. That's why some of my most disciplined patients who eat clean, walk daily, take their meds, still struggle with cholesterol, because their nervous system is doing the damage. A story of release, not resistance. Let me tell you about Ellen Young, former elementary school teacher from Spokane, Washington. She was widowed, lived alone, and carried her pain quietly. She developed atrial fibrillation, an irregular heartbeat often linked to stress. Her doctor prescribed blood thinners. But what helped most? Laughter. It started with a weekly game night at her senior center, then a walking group, then journaling, then saying out loud, finally, how lonely she felt. Her sleep improved, her heart rate stabilized, her cholesterol, surprisingly, dropped 16 points in 4 months. She once told me, "I didn't just need a pill, I needed to exhale." That exhale, it's not just metaphorical. It lowers cortisol, activates your parasympathetic system, relaxes arteries, thins the blood naturally. It's why meditation, prayer, slow breathing, even gentle music are more than emotional support. They're circulatory medicine. What you don't say still affects your blood. Do you carry tension in your shoulders? Do you clench your jaw when you read the news? Do you lie in bed at night thinking about things you never speak about? That is not harmless. That is biological data. Your body records it. Your blood feels it. And if you never release it, through movement, tears, words, breath, it builds. Stress doesn't always come from trauma. Sometimes it's just the accumulation of unspoken responsibility. But you don't need to carry it forever. How to unwind the arteries, one practice at a time. Here's what I often recommend, not all at once, but as options. 4-7-8 breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, exhale for 8, 3 rounds before sleep. Gentle journaling. Write a letter to your own body. Thank it. Apologize. Listen. Nature exposure, 15 minutes under trees, no phone, no agenda, just sky. Laughter therapy. Yes, it's real. Watch something that makes you laugh daily. It increases HDL and lowers inflammation. Singing, humming, prayer, or poetry. Anything that softens your chest and opens your breath. Because every moment of calm you create lowers your clot risk and teaches your body that it's safe to flow again. The blood remembers what the heart holds. Samuel eventually found relief, not through another medication, but through connection. He joined a local veterans group, started sleeping more deeply, began talking, not just about cholesterol, but about life. His levels dropped, but more than that, his fear faded. "Doc," he said, "my numbers are better, but the real gift is I'm not scared of my body anymore. That's what stress takes from us, trust, and that's what peace gives back." So let me ask you, what can you release tonight? A memory? A responsibility? A fear? Let it go, not because it's easy, but because your blood is listening. And in the next chapter, we'll explore the next healing key, connection. Why being seen, touched, and known doesn't just soothe your soul, but saves your life. The loneliness that clogs the arteries. When I think about cardiovascular risk, I don't just think about cholesterol or clots or calcified arteries. I think about silence, the kind of silence that fills a house after a partner passes away. The silence of eating alone, the silence of not being touched, not being heard, not being asked, "How are you, really?" Because that silence isn't just sad, it's dangerous. Let me introduce you to Walter Hensley. Lived alone in a quiet suburb outside Cincinnati. His numbers were climbing, cholesterol, blood pressure, markers of inflammation. But when I asked about his diet, it was reasonable. When I asked about exercise, he was walking daily. When I asked about stress, he said, "No more than usual." But when I asked how often he spoke to someone, really spoke, he looked down and said, "Sometimes a week goes by and I realize I haven't said a word out loud." That's when I understood this wasn't a cardiovascular crisis. It was emotional malnutrition. Touch, talk, and the chemistry of clot prevention. Here's what we know from decades of research. Social isolation increases the risk of cardiovascular disease by up to 30%. Loneliness triggers chronic low-grade inflammation. Lack of physical touch raises cortisol and lowers nitric oxide, a key compound that keeps blood vessels open and relaxed. Emotional neglect leads to elevated blood clotting factors in the bloodstream. In short, being unseen can literally harden your heart, chemically, biologically, and emotionally. But the opposite is also true. Hugging reduces blood pressure. Eye contact raises oxytocin, which calms the nervous system. Talking with someone you trust can lower LDL cholesterol and reduce arterial stiffness. And it doesn't have to be romantic. It just has to be real. The cafe that saved a life. Clara Jensen, 74, was on the edge. Widowed, estranged from her daughter, and recently diagnosed with high cholesterol and early signs of carotid artery plaque. When I asked her what brought her joy, she said, "Nothing really. I just passed time." So I gave her a strange prescription. I told her to visit the same cafe every week, at the same time, and just be there. Look up, smile, let herself be seen. It took 3 weeks. Then one day, someone said hello, a woman her age. They got to talking, and the next week, they talked again and again. Clara's numbers didn't magically disappear, but they shifted. Her blood pressure dropped. Her heart rate variability improved. Her sleep returned. Her inflammation markers fell, because now she wasn't just alive. She was accompanied, and the body responds to that. It always does. Connection is a daily vitamin. You may be eating right, you may be walking every day, but if your heart is quietly starving for company, no supplement can fix that. So let me offer 5 quiet practices that heal more than your arteries. Call someone today, without a reason. A simple, "I was thinking of you" is medicine. Join something, a book club, a gardening circle, a walking group, anything where your name is remembered. Write letters, even if they're not sent, even if they're to yourself. Expression is circulation for the soul. Hug longer, and seconds or more. It changes your heartbeat. Literally, let someone in, not everyone, just one. Your doctor, your neighbor, a friend. Don't carry the weight alone, because the longer we go without being seen, the more our body starts to close off. And the more we're met with real presence, the more our body remembers how to trust. The hardest part is reaching First Walter, the man who went days without speaking, now volunteers at a local library. He reads to children on Thursdays. He says they don't care about his age or his voice or his cholesterol. They just want a story, he told me. And I smiled, because so do we all. So if you've been quiet lately, if the ache in your chest is more emotional than physical, if you're managing your numbers but still feel disconnected, this is your sign, not to rush into a crowd, but to reach gently, quietly, bravely, because no one should die from silence. And in our next chapter, we'll talk about the final critical pillar of prevention, rest, and how deep restorative sleep is one of the most powerful protectors of your heart and arteries. When the body doesn't sleep, the blood doesn't heal. For years, Helen Swanson believed her cholesterol was just one of those things. She ate well, walked daily, took her statins, but her numbers never truly improved. And then she mentioned, almost as an afterthought, "I haven't slept more than 4 hours straight in a decade." That's when it clicked, because what Helen and millions of others don't realize is that sleep is not a luxury. It's biological maintenance. It's when your liver balances cholesterol, when your blood vessels soften, when inflammation drops, when your blood gets the signal to stop being on high alert, and when that rest is broken, shallow, or absent, everything starts to fray. The dangerous cost of sleep deprivation. Let's get clear. Lack of sleep doesn't just make you tired. It makes your blood toxic. Here's what happens when you don't sleep well. Cortisol spikes, raising cholesterol and blood sugar. Insulin resistance increases, leading to fatty liver, and more LDL blood pressure remains elevated, putting stress on arterial walls. Inflammation rises, fueling clot formation. Platelet stickiness increases, making clots more likely. Even one night of poor sleep can raise your C-reactive protein, a key marker of cardiovascular inflammation. And chronic sleep issues? They don't just raise risk, they create it. That's why people who sleep less than 6 hours a night have a significantly higher risk of heart attack and stroke, even if they do everything else right. The night your heart repairs, imagine your arteries as busy city roads. During sleep, traffic slows. Repair crews come out. Plaque gets cleared. Signals are adjusted. And by morning, your body is refreshed. Not just your brain, but your entire cardiovascular system. But without that rest, the damage lingers. The repairs stall. And over time, the city begins to crumble, quietly but surely. That's why improving sleep is one of the most powerful and underrated ways to lower cholesterol and prevent clots. Not with more hours alone, but with better quality. Small rituals, big repair. I remember Robert Templeton, 76, from Boise, Idaho. A night owl, retired engineer, proud of his 2 a.m. crossword habit. But his cholesterol was climbing. His triglycerides were stubborn. His blood pressure refused to settle. We made one change. A sleep rhythm. No screens after 8 p.m. Chamomile tea with tart cherry juice. A 15-minute walk at Sunset Magnesium Supplement with his doctor's approval. A cool, dark bedroom with quiet music. Within 6 weeks, he called me with disbelief. "I'm waking up rested," he said. "And my labs, they're finally shifting." He didn't change his statin. He didn't double his fiber. He just rested, and his body did the rest. Sleep is not a weakness. It's a strategy. Too many people feel guilty for resting. They call it laziness or getting soft. Especially men, especially those who've been taught to push through fatigue. But here's the truth. Sleep is not an escape. It's your immune system's workshop. It's your blood's therapy. It's your heart's reset button. And if you want to lower cholesterol, thin the blood naturally, and repair vessel walls, there is no pill on earth that can replace deep, consistent sleep. A quiet question for you. Tonight. When you lie down tonight, I want you to ask, what is my body trying to do right now? And then answer gently. It's trying to heal. It's not trying to punish you. It's not fighting you. It's just been waiting for stillness. Because once your heart feels safe, it stops pounding. Once your brain feels held, it stops racing. And once you begin sleeping, not just closing your eyes but letting go, your blood begins to soften. And in our final chapter, we'll return full circle. To the man in the garden, to the woman at the cafe, to the heartbeat inside your own chest. We'll gather everything we've learned and leave you with a path not of rules, but of return, to trust, to flow, to life. The garden, the clot, and the choice that changed everything you remember. John McAllister, the retired teacher, 67, who collapsed while planting tomatoes in his Nashville backyard. What I didn't tell you before was what happened after. John recovered, slowly, gratefully. But something inside him shifted. He stopped waiting for the next emergency. He started tending, not just to his garden, but to his life. He changed how he ate. He began walking, not out of duty, but with joy. He called his daughter every Sunday. He slept, deeply, purposefully. He sent me a letter 6 months later. "Doc," he wrote, "I used to think health was something I kept. Now I see it's something I cultivate, like a garden. You feed it, water it, prune the weeds, and one day it gives back." And he signed it. Still blooming, John. You were never just preventing a stroke. Let's be honest, most people hear the words cholesterol or blood clot and feel a chill. It's a threat, a fear, a countdown. But what we've uncovered together over these 7 chapters is something richer. Yes, you've learned how to replace harmful foods with healing ones, reclaim motion from dangerous stillness, calm the nervous system from chronic stress, reconnect with others in ways that heal the blood, sleep in a way that restores the arteries. But more than that, I hope you've come to see, you are not a diagnosis. You are not a walking statistic. You are not late to this work. You are right on time. Because now, maybe for the first time in years, you see health not as a report card, but as a relationship. Between you and your body. Between you and your life. Every beat still matters. Let me tell you what I've seen in 35 years as a physician. A 79-year-old man with a clot history who started painting again and saw his inflammation drop. A widow in her 80s who formed a walking group of neighbors and cut her cholesterol by 40 points. A couple in their 70s who began cooking every meal together and rekindled not just their arteries, but their affection. Not because they chased health, but because they chose presence. And health followed, because every heartbeat you feel is not just survival. It's a message. It says, I'm still here. I still care. I still believe. You don't need to fix everything. If you take only one thing from this entire journey, let it be this. You do not need to become someone new. You simply need to return to trust, to nourishment, to motion, to rest, to connection, to the whisper of your own blood saying, I am not against you. I just need space to move. That space begins at your table, at your doorstep, at your bedtime, in your voice. And once you give it, consistently, kindly, imperfectly, your body will respond, not with a miracle, but with momentum. Back to the garden. The last photo John sent me was of a tomato vine, heavy with fruit, sunlit and strong. He wrote, I planted again this year. I figured my body's trying. I should too. So here's your moment, not to fear the numbers, but to feed the soil. You are not broken. You are becoming, still blooming, still beating, still very much alive. And if you start today with one meal, one walk, one call, one breath, it might just be enough to begin the rest of your life. With all my respect, Dr.